right.
We're just waiting on one Republican member to join this committee, and we'll start as a subcommittee. So, Sergeant, if you can call some of our Republican colleagues so we can get going. All right. Okay, good afternoon. We're going to start Utilities and Commerce Committee as a subcommittee. We note the presence of not all our members, but we're going to begin. And I see that I have Senator Padilla. Are you ready, Senator Padilla? The first bill up is SB 1040, and the chair's recommendation is a due pass with amended committee analysis. Senator Padilla, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Just 1 minute, Senator. I want to note the presence of a quorum, so can we call roll, Madam Secretary?
Knight. Here. Berryhill. Buchanan. Here. Carter. Fletcher. Fong. Fuentes. Fuller. Furutani. Here. Huffman. Ma. Here. Skinner. Swanson. Here. Valines. Bradford.
Here. Okay, Senator Padilla, please proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know you made reference to a couple of the recommended amendments in the analysis. The first, and I absolutely accept it, is the one that calls for an annual report on the program, which I believe can be helpful in not only making sure that we're holding the program and the administrators accountable, but could lead to some policy improvements to the program over time. The second, as it relates to the timing of the collection of the additional funds, I'd like to sort of have a conversation about that. But the backdrop for the bill is this. We know each and every day that broadband is increasingly critical for the progress of our economy at the state and at the national level. Thanks to an innovative broadband task force report from a couple of years ago, we found out that about 4% of Californians still do not have broadband access or service. That translates into about 1.4 million people. And as we're getting more granularly clearer information about who has access and the quality of that access, I'm actually seeing a little bit of a tick up in, if not the unserved, certainly the underserved. And of the folks who do have broadband options, we know that 50% have internet connectivity at speeds that are not necessarily sufficient for telecommuting, online education, accessing some government services, etc. When this fund, the Advanced Services Fund, was first established, we put a dollar figure of $100 million to the fund, more than half of which the PUC has already awarded. But we know that other proposals that are being reviewed, plus additional applications that we expect, would significantly surpass that $100 million level. At a time when we're successfully leveraging Recovery Act dollars from the federal government, we felt the time was right to not only extend the program in terms of time, but expand the program in terms of dollars made available. By the way, some of the projects that have already been completed include the Pinon project in Riverside County, the Livingston project in Merced County, and nearly completed is the Cabello-Laytonville project in Mendocino County. So we truly are reaching all parts of the state, which was our intention. This bill would make an additional $125 million available for these grants, as well as set up two accounts under the fund. One, the Broadband Infrastructure Revolving Loan Account, which would allow for a loan program that would replenish itself in addition to just straight grants. Second, the Rural and Urban Regional Broadband Consortia grant, to build on successful consortia in some parts of the states that have competed for other dollars, both public and private, and has helped ensure the sort of efficient use of the dollars that are awarded. This bill came out of the Senate with strong bipartisan support and no votes. I know there's some folks here who want to testify on behalf of the bill, but let me close by just acknowledging my question, not so much a concern, but my question on the second proposed amendment in the analysis. I know there's a couple of ways of wanting to cap the amount of monies, at least on an annual basis. One of the options is, well, let's limit it to $25 million only for the 5 years and get to our $125 million that way. It's the very nature of the fund and the projects themselves that urge me to fight for a little bit more flexibility. It's not an annual appropriation, if you will. The nature of the project applications, the nature of the project build-outs, if you will, and the fact that this is a reimbursement program means that it's not going to be a smooth curve when it comes to how the dollars are being spent. You're going to have more one year than the next year, relatively speaking. Maybe it's more in the first year, a little bit less in the second. Maybe it's less in the next year because the applications and projects are still coming together, and you're going to have a demand for increased reimbursement the second year. To have this $25 million cap, I don't think is reflective of how it's going to work in the real world. And I'd hate for the hands of our PUC commissioners or the folks out there actually building out the networks to be tied unnecessarily. So I get your ratepayer impact concern. I share it significantly, and happy to work with you on language that would best address those concerns while not providing too many restrictions to the folks overseeing the program.
And I thank you for your testimony, Senator, and I, too, share your concerns as it relates to ratepayer shock, and that was one of the impetus on asking for this additional language. I do understand your concern as it relates to making sure that there are readily funds available for the build-out and making sure the program is fully implemented, and that's why we were going to ask for the annual review to see where the money was spent, how it's being utilized.
And that amendment I do take.
Yeah, and I'm willing to, if you are, to work with this committee and move forward and just to move the bill today as is, and if as amended, I should say, and work with you to see if we can tweak that at a later date and bring it back to this committee if need be.
With the two amendments as opposed to the one?
Well, we're talking about with three as we are right now.
Okay, and let me just be clear. Would that be sort of working on language in the future?
Yes.
But this session, not sort of in future years?
I'm not talking about in the future years. Yeah, this session. That's my commitment to it.
That would be fine.
Just let them know your goal is to levelize
Yeah.
the collection.
Yeah, and that's, I think the Senator and I have the same objective as far as levelizing the collections of these fees. And I know it's only pennies on the dollars in the large scheme of things, but at the same time, in this tough economic times, that was pretty much the reasoning for going there or setting that cap at $25 million. And I was just looking at how the money has been expended over the past years, and, all the money hadn't been utilized. So I'm just figuring that now, bringing it back to where it was prior to, the B funds. So you still utilizing that money and and having that money available to move forward. So,
okay.
All right. So I know we have folks who want to testify. Do we have any questions from members of this committee? Yes.
Yeah, it just seems to me that in tough economic times, rather than limit it to the $25 million, you want to get people connected as fast as you can, because that, for many people, that they go to the libraries, they get online, and that's how they do their job search. And we passed a bill last year requiring all schools to offer at a minimum an AP, high schools offer at a minimum a AP English and AP Math course, and that was with the provision that if for small school districts, students would be able to take those courses online if they didn't have sufficient demand to assign a teacher to a course. So it seems to me that when it comes to internet access, the faster we can get everyone connected, the better. So, my recommendation or my thought as you move forward would be rather than necessarily limiting the amount, to monitor the progress to determine, how that's being spent. But I would think the faster we can connect everyone in this state, the better it's going to be for the economy and the more opportunity it's going to represent for all of our citizens.
Mr. Fuatani.
Thank you. Just even though we're talking about pennies on the dollar, what is the impact for the ratepayers? Do we have a sense of that? How much more will they end up? We're going to increase the fund by over 100%.
They're going to continue.
And what is the impact going to be, whether it's all at one time or 25 million a year, or what is the impact on the ratepayer? That's the question.
The number crunches, if my information is correct, to about 12 cents a month for most folks. If your bill is about $90, and that's sufficient for the amount that we're seeking here.
For the whole, if we do the whole thing right now.
Yes.
Right.
And it's only for a limited term period. In this case, the 5-year extension. Well, or up until we hit that $125 million amount, and then it's paused.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Buchanan.
Sorry, I'm looking at my notes. I did have one other question. I think you have the final report that's due in April 2017. Is there a reason it's pushed out 7 years?
The final report?
You have interim audit as December 31st, 2010, and report its final. The PUC would report its final findings in April 1, 2017.
2017. Well, with the amendment that we're getting, there's not going to be an annual report.
Okay.
I think we addressed that with your amendment, so.
Right.
So, okay. Senator, you had folks who want to testify in support of the bill.
Alicia Priego with the Public Utilities Commission. I'll speak briefly because we have other folks that can speak to specific projects. At the Commission, we are currently reviewing 13 projects estimated at $30 million, which will bump us from the $54 million that we're currently at to almost the $100 million cap. And, those projects are contingent upon receiving federal grant dollars, which won't be decided upon until the end of this year. And so, these projects are subject to CEQA requirements. And, one of our larger projects we've seen is taking approximately 15 months. So some of these projects may bump up against that 2013 deadline. And so for certainty for these entities that are securing financing for their projects, we want to make sure that this program continues and the sunset is extended. We are co-sponsors of the bill and ask for your support. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members, Mike Dillon, representing the California Library Association. Libraries are playing an increasing role in ensuring all Californians have access to broadband, both in terms of the last mile, as Senator referred to, and in terms of speed, as Ms. Buchanan referred to. So we thank Senator for his efforts in obtaining additional funding.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Steve Karp. I'm with the Small Business Development Center. It's a SBA-funded program whose sole purpose is to help small businesses by giving them no-cost one-on-one counseling. In dealing with the small businesses in Northern California, especially the rural areas, one of the biggest concerns is having internet access for their business. And in the rural areas, there is either no access for some of these small businesses or very limited access, both in the amount of access they can have as well as the redundancy that's critical to small businesses to allow them to compete worldwide, literally. And I appreciate your support of this bill. Thank you.
Connie Stewart with the California Center for Rural Policy and Humboldt State University. And I mostly work on healthcare issues, and I can tell you this bill is critical for hooking up clinics, remote clinics, and also hospitals in our region. And many of these communities, I wanted to point out, Senator Padilla mentioned Covelo. Covelo is a very remote tribal community. And many of these communities have enough funding to cover operating costs for broadband. They do not have enough funding to put in the initial fiber. And so that's really what this money is being used for, is getting that initial cost so the communities can pay as they go for it. And so that's why this is just critical, and I thank you for your support.
My name is John Paul. I'm with Spiral Internet in Nevada County. I'm also representative of Nevada County Economic Resource Council. We have a project called Nevada County Connected that did get funding through CSF. We are currently in due diligence in round 2 funding of ARA funding. And what we found is that in the rural area, in our rural area, we have created comprehensive projects that not only include broadband internet to people, many of our customers have dial-up still, but also public safety, fire safety, the schools and libraries are all using these infrastructures. And I'd like to say that the funding is really going towards an infrastructure where the other providers and the other entities can use it for last mile service. I'd like to encourage you to continue that funding. Without CSF funding, we would not have been able to go forward.
Lloyd Levine on behalf of the California Emerging Technology Fund, of which I'm a board member. Also, as former chair of this committee, I worked very closely on the first version of this bill. The California Emerging Technology Fund believes the first version of the bill implemented a couple of years ago has really had a profound effect, but this legislation is needed to close the gap even further. Thank you.
Tom Renfrey with Strategic Local Government Services on behalf of Siskiyou County in support. Thank you.
Tim Valderrama on behalf of TechNet. To build briefly on Ms. Buchanan's comments, our companies kind of view this widespread broadband deployment as probably one of the greatest economic incentives and benefits that can be provided to California. We thank Senator Padilla for his work on this issue and ask for your aye vote.
Matthew Marcus with the Division of Ratepayer Advocates. We support the bill as amended. It would add much needed accountability and transparency. We urge your support.
Richard Chabran, California Community Technology Policy Group. With the amendments that have been taken, we also support this bill. We think it will increase and provide transparency, and we support the goal of this fund. Thank you.
My name is Cesar Motz. I'm with the Southeast Community Development Corporation, representing the Southeast Technology Collaborative. And my message to this committee is that the digital divide is not just a rural issue, but it's also an urban issue. And our collaborative has been working on these issues for years. And we have many residents in our southeast area of Los Angeles County that are affected by the digital divide. So on behalf of the coalition, we support this bill and urge your aye vote. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Sandy Romina. I represent Tuolumne County Behavioral Health and the Amador Tuolumne Community Action Agency. We are a rural grantee. We are your underserved and underrepresented. And on a personal note, I'd love to have something other than dial-up to conduct my business, and we definitely need your support in this bill. Appreciate your attention.
Are there any witnesses in opposition? Seeing none, Senator, would you like to close?
Yes, certainly would ask your aye vote, and again, look forward to working with you on to further refine the language. I know we're going to be taking amendments today. The two areas, again, one, the $25 million annual cap. I think I would like to push for more flexibility as we work on this together to better reflect the very nature of the program. The other piece, the no new collection until after January 1st, 2011. I believe language in the bill already states that the $125 million we're proposing be collected after January 1st, 2011. To Assemblywoman Buchanan's point, it's not just about getting people connected sooner rather than later, but recognizing that a lot of the projects are leveraging federal dollars. It's also about putting people back to work sooner rather than later, both in rural areas and in urban areas where maybe it's not so much a question of being unserved, but it's in many cases, as in your district and as in my district, where people may be underserved. Also, to speak to the timeliness of wanting to move as much as we can as quickly as possible is the greater context of the National Broadband Plan, and I'll be speaking to that in the next bill that I present. But the National Broadband Plan really clearly sets a new priority and framework for national broadband deployment, with funding streams being made available, and certainly regulatory proceedings happening sooner rather than later. So I just want to make sure California is as best positioned as possible to maximize those benefits. Ask your I vote.
And let me be very clear, Senator, and I've heard Ms. Buchanan as well as Mr. Futani's questions and concerns as to the cost, understanding that we've only expended half the money that has been collected so far. That was another reason, and understanding our first interim report is not due until the end of the year. I just thought it would give us an opportunity just to be a little bit more conscious, and as you are, and I know, and I commend you for all your good work here, and it's the commitment of me as chair in this committee and as well as staff to continue to work to refine that language if need be before it reaches the floor. Okay.
I move the bill as the chair defined it.
Okay. It's been moved by Mr. Futani, seconded by Mr. Fong. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Knight. No. Knight, no. Berryhill. Buchanan. Buchanan, aye. Carter. Carter, aye. Fletcher. Fong. Fong, aye. Fuentes. Fuller. Furutani.
Aye.
Furutani, aye. Huffman. Huffman, aye. Ma. Ma, aye. Skinner. Swanson.
Swanson, aye.
Swanson, aye. Valines. Bradford.
Aye.
Bradford, aye.
The bill's out 8-1. Thank you, Senator. And next up is...
Let's have two more bills. I
Yes.
believe next is 1462, and if not, let me go to 1462. And again, broadband-related legislation. As I mentioned a couple minutes ago, the Federal Communications Commission released the National Broadband Plan just a couple of months ago, only to underscore a fact that we all know the single biggest policy issue in decades in the telecommunications arena is our commitment to continue to upgrade and expand our telecommunications networks. And the fate and the strength of our state's economy and our national economy is dependent on how many people have access and knowledge of high-speed internet access. Indeed, California has been a leader, starting with the Broadband Council appointed by the current governor, the Broadband Task Force report that they released with several recommendations, DIFCA legislation from 2006 that went a long way in adding players to the broadband game, the establishment of the Advanced Services Fund that we just discussed in the prior bill. The legislature, the governor, the PUC, private sector partners, nonprofit partners, and others have put California in a strong leadership position. This bill is a proposal to ensure that we maintain the momentum and that we keep California in that leadership position across the country. We propose to do that by doing the following. SB 1462 would establish in state government the California Broadband Council in order to achieve several goals. Among them, maximize California's opportunities for federal funds made available under the new broadband plan. Second, it would increase coordination of state resources for broadband networks, both public and private. Third, it would ensure that the broadband deployment and adoption by all Californians remain a top priority with no lapse in leadership as we, frankly, transition from the current governor to the next, not knowing full well who that will be. The bill specifies the members of the council to include the top state officials with duties related to broadband policy, including the state CIO, the PUC, the California Emergency Management Agency, Superintendent of Public Instruction, the Director of General Services, Secretary of BT&H, as well as Senate and Assembly appointees. The goal here is not to create a new bureaucracy, but rather ensure that the various parts of our government are working together, are coordinating and collaborating in a way that maximizes the public dollars that we've invested in broadband infrastructure. I know that since this bill was in print, we've heard from many stakeholders who want to be part of the effort. That's the good news. A lot of the letters of support in your file are in support of the concept and maybe asking the question, can we be part of it too? And as much as we want to ensure people's involvement and participation, I'm at this point reluctant to establish a broadband council the size of 50 or more. So we're trying to strike the right balance here between having a focused, efficient council, but certainly would want the participation and input from as many of the stakeholders as possible. Let me conclude by suggesting that we have no time to lose. Since the FCC's release of the broadband plan in March, it has initiated 10 proceedings already that will impact public safety, education, broadband accessibility for disabled persons, and a new approach for funding broadband in high-cost, underserved areas for low-income citizens. We expect dozens more proceedings to be initiated before the end of the year. In fact, the next one, in just a few days, the FCC is opening a proceeding to consider a whole new approach to regulating broadband. With so much at stake, California needs to make sure we're part of the mix, that we're united, and that we're focused. And I believe this Broadband Council is a big step in helping ensure that. With that, I'd certainly entertain your questions and ask for your vote.
Great. Are there any questions from committee members?
Yes, I
Ms. Carter.
would like to know, how does the task force interact with this council, and who would have authority? I mean, apparently the task force is still going to be a part of this, so.
Well, the broadband task force?
No, the task force that the governor set up.
Right.
It's still going to be
That was known as the California Broadband Task Force. They met for a couple of years and have issued a report with a number of recommendations. But even that commission was established by the governor, but its existence has not been codified, nor has a formal adoption of their recommendations been codified. That's what this bill would seek to do, make sure that those recommendations become part of the policy of the state, and this council is charged with ensuring their implementation.
I think I read somewhere where the task force would be reconvened at intervals by the governor too. So what would they be reconvened for?
Again, I can't speak to the task force itself. That was an embodiment of Governor Schwarzenegger. As we know, this is his last year. Whether it's going to be a Governor Brown or a Governor Whitman, I got to believe in concept they're going to be supportive of broadband efforts, but I'm just not sure if it's going to be their number one to-do item on day one in office. So by codifying it and giving the legislature a role here, we're much more in control, and we're cementing those priorities.
So I guess my question is, so the task force there would no longer be a task
Correct.
force. Okay.
Ms. Buchanan.
Yeah, could you respond to the groups that have the support and concept in terms of having one representative from industry, which I think makes sense in terms of being able to work together with industry as we build out our broadband, expand our broadband capabilities. And then there was another that asked for representatives from private sector. I know you can't have a committee of 50 people, but some of these, certainly it makes sense to have, industry, business needs in terms of how business operates on through the broadband and some of these others representatives that they mentioned.
Right. The makeup of the council as in print in the bill was our first cut at striking this balance between having a robust membership of the council but without making it too large of a council. And there's a lot of folks who, again, support the concept but wish there was another slot for this, another slot for that. And we'll continue to entertain those and work with stakeholders. But I'll tell you, since we put the bill in print and started hearing from folks, one of the other ideas, one of the other possibilities, and maybe it becomes part of the bill, or maybe it happens without necessarily being part of the bill, is there's nothing to keep the council from establishing some advisory committees, for example, and getting the formal participation of some of these stakeholders, maybe some to focus on private sector partnership and investment, and others to focus and coordinate the public sector investment and deployment. So there's various ways of ensuring people's participation, but we're trying to strike the balance between having a focused entity that would, frankly, yank the chains of state government to make sure that people are talking and coordinating, but not touch a big council that it becomes inefficient by its very nature.
Okay.
Any more questions? Witnesses in support.
Mr. Chairman, members, Mike Dillon, again representing the California Library Association. We are in support, one of those in support. if amended, but in support regardless. We would like some consideration, if possible, recognizing senators being inundated, of getting representation of the entire library community by having the state librarian on there. The new librarian is very energetic, has taken the lead in the whole broadband effort, and we just think it would be very appropriate to have the state librarian on there. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members, Bernie Orozco with the California Cable and Telecommunications Association, representing the largest cable operators here in the state, Comcast, Time Warner, Charter, Cox. We are one of those entities that is supportive in concept, but would like to see some industry representation on the committee, on the council. Right now, the council is made up of government entities and one non-governmental entity. So our issue or concern would be if you were going to have just government entities on it, we would leave it just at that and reduce your council to just those government entities. Otherwise, you have some industry representation who are working on these issues and not a broader spectrum. But we are supportive in concept. We do think it's advisable. I think the concept of technical advisory committees is also very useful. If you want to get representation from the industries that are on the cutting edge, that have the new latest emerging technologies, then you do want to have industry participation. I mean, government will give you a certain portion of how to approach things in a fair and equitable manner, and that's important. But I think if you want to really talk about the emerging technologies, you would really want industry represented. But we are supportive.
Mr. Chairman and members, James Jack here today on behalf of CalTel. We're here in support of the bill, applaud the effort to facilitate California's continued coordinated and meaningful work in broadband deployment and in the National Broadband Plan. This effort has important implications for competitive choice in California, which is of critical importance both to consumers and the competitive industry, and we're happy to be here in support. Thank you.
Lloyd Levine again on behalf of the Board of Directors of the California Emerging Technology Fund. We support the bill as is. We believe the group should be a small group, not a large group. The advisory commission model is one that CETF uses. We have a relatively small number of board members and then a large panel of expert advisors that we convene at regular intervals and call on as needed for expert advice, but believe, as the Senator said, in the direction of the state and broadband policy and better integration, a small working group of high-level leaders is most appropriate.
Mr. Chair, members, my name is Angela Gilliard. I am the Legislative Director for University of California on Health Issues, and we are here today in full support of this bill because of its impact on the telehealth and telemedicine within the state. We are involved in two major initiatives through the state, one to bring telehealth to rural areas, and the other to bring telehealth into medical education to expand access. We believe this is a bill, we believe that coordination is essential, and we support the bill just the way it stands. Thank you.
Pam Loomis on behalf of the California Independent Telephone Companies, which is in support if amended. The rural telephone companies of California are very supportive of the efforts to coordinate the expansion of broadband to make sure that there's adequate access to broadband throughout the state of California. They are concerned, though, about creating another entity in the government code when there are perfectly capable entities already in existence, like the Chief Information Officer and their ability to coordinate the different agencies and bring them together, or the Public Utilities Commission. Quite frankly, these kinds of efforts need staff support. The different heads of these agencies need the staff support when they come together and meet, and so it makes sense to have an entity that has direct relation to the legislature and a budget line and the staff to support the efforts that are underway in this council concept. Thank you.
Yes, I'm Richard Chabran, a California Community Technology Policy Group. We also are in support of the concept of this council. I want to raise 4 points. One is that on February 16th, I testified at the Senate Utilities and Communications Committee and recommended this kind of a body. Second, in our efforts to fully realize the benefits of the California Teleconnect Fund, we've worked for like about 10 years collaboratively with the legislature, the state administration, and the CPUC to raise the number of community-based organizations participating in the program to almost 2,000 from less than a handful. At every turn, we provided on-the-ground information about how this program could be successful. It's already been noted, the California Broadband Task Force, and it didn't have 50 members. It had about 23, but it was really more representative than what's being suggested here. And finally, on a recent report that we authored, we found that many communities are not being engaged as stakeholders in the broadband deliberations. All of these examples demonstrate the need for the Council with broad representation in order for California to maximize opportunities under the National Broadband Plan, increase coordination of state resources, and address broadband deployment. As such, we urge the author to broaden the representation of the Council to include 2 members from the private sector, a representative from the nonprofit organization that offers telehealth, a representative of the nonprofit organizations that offers technology and networking services to educational segments like Scenic, a representative of higher education segments, a representative from public libraries, and representatives from nonprofit organizations serving the community technology organizations. This participation of these stakeholders is imperative for creating and promoting successful adoption and development of broadband and are key partners in this effort. We've enjoyed working with the different segments of government, but we've found that many times, since they're not really working, they are not at the grassroots level. A lot of times they don't recognize what the problems are. That's what we've been able to work with them to overcome these. And so we think that if we're going to have a council, we need to have a broader representation. Thank you.
Lenny Goldberg on behalf of TURN. We come down with those who want to see broader representation. And maybe to just clarify this a little, there are 2 things going on here. This proposal really says, let's take all the main state players and coordinate them. And that's fine. That can be done by the governor. That doesn't need to be done in legislation. We've got the PUC, get everybody together and work on the state's role. However, as Mr. Chabran said, the Broadband Task Force really benefited from the participation of nonprofit and community groups, from industry, from a bunch of different stakeholders. So you've got really an apples and oranges situation. You got the bill says let's coordinate all the state agencies, but where are all the users and the community groups that are going to be there? Now that may be a separate approach. I actually, from this bill, I just think the governor can say, hey, state agencies, let's do what we need, but we ought to be asking that the rest of the communities that are affected be brought in. So that's TURN's position.
Tim Valderrama on behalf of TechNet. We basically agree with the comments by the 2 presenters before us. We'd like to see a little bit more of a diverse group, including industry and others, kind of brought to the table on this. But we're very supportive of the direction the senator is going, and we recognize the bill has not been in print long, and we stand ready to work with the senator as it moves forward.
Great, thank you.
Connie Stewart from the California Center for Rural Policy. While everybody's asking, can we have some rural representation too? But if we're going to amend the bill, but we're in complete support of this bill. And one of the things I'd like to thank the senator for is recognizing that California needs to be talking to the federal government about what's happening on the National Broadband Plan. The governor's task force really focused on how California could do things better, but we have completely missed the boat as a state talking to our federal partners in one voice. And one of the critical things, when we did our round 1, we did not get a lot of funding because we were not coordinating our efforts there. So I see this bill as critical moving forward to make sure that California is talking to the federal government. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any witnesses in opposition? Seeing none, Mr. Fuatani.
It's one of the challenges, I think, in terms of participatory government. It takes the wisdom of Solomon not to split the baby in this case, but to determine any kind of democratic body who should sit on that body. Stakeholders, participants, not to the size that it's paralyzing, but to the size that it's effective. I think in terms of concept, Senator, your bill is right on target from the standpoint of a comprehensive approach, in this case to broadband. Other issues, if we look at them in terms of state government, we have all these different departments that participate in things, but the coordination is, it seems, always lacking. The silos, the turf, who's what, and so forth and so on makes it difficult. We're dealing with an issue, and I know this is a little bit far afield, but around workforce development and career tech ed. Went to the state of Washington to look at how they do it and how they coordinate all of the many groups that are doing it. They have, and I think one of the key things was they codified it, as you said, Senator, in statute. So it's not some advisory group that sort of spins out there according to somebody's interest. It's a part of statute, what gives it some clout. The other thing was very limited as to who participated, because if you have too many people at the table, nothing gets done. So where that place is relative to whether it's task forces, as you're talking about, I think the essence of what you want to do is in the concept relative to participation of stakeholders, and that includes nonprofits, users, people in the industry. But how to mobilize them may be the question relative to your task force idea. But I think in lieu of the fact that the governor's, in fact, terming out, we don't know what the new governor or who it's going to be, what their view is. I think you've made the point very clear with your other legislation and your third piece that you're going to talk about, that time is sort of the essence, that we be able to respond as a state relative to a comprehensive view on how we're going to deal with this issue. So I think your idea is right on target. How we deal with who's going to sit at the table, whether the table's going to be square, whether it's going to be round, oval, whatever the case may be. Those questions always are tough, but will emerge. I think it's better to start small and grow than start big and grow bigger.
Other members? All right. Mr. Hoffman.
Well, I want to echo those who have said that your bill's trying to do a good thing. I applaud you for this work, but I think we've heard from a pretty broad coalition of stakeholders that they feel like some additional representation would complement your intentions. And from where I sit, it seems to me that your goal of making this policy group a powerful force in driving both the development and implementation of policy in the years ahead would be well served by a really broad, credible group. So I wouldn't want a 50-person working group either. I'm with you on that. But the letter that we've just gotten would take your group from 9 to 17. Maybe not every one of those requested other positions is necessary, but it seems to me that some of them are very constructive suggestions. So I'd like you to speak as specifically as you can, Senator, on your intentions to broaden this group, because that's the one piece of this bill I'm struggling with right now.
I love it. Let me ask the members of the committee to follow me here on a couple of things. I mean, if anything, what I've heard from the public comment and from the letters that we've gotten is it's underscored the main point here. Broadband touches every aspect of our lives. What do people use high-speed internet access for? I mean, it's a whole myriad of things. It started out as a research tool connecting universities around the country. It grew into something that served other educational purposes. We want to connect every school, connect every library. You know, everybody needs internet access. Governments began to utilize technology to try to improve the efficiencies and the effectiveness of delivering services to our constituents, from the federal level on down to the local level and everywhere in between. All of a sudden, people realized the commercial opportunities with the internet. I mean, raise your hand if you've ever bought something online. So, huh? We don't admit that. As long as you pay the tax, it's okay. It has raised public safety implications and public safety opportunities. It certainly fundamentally changed the way we communicate to one another, not just in a workplace setting, but socially as well. I don't think there's a person in this room that hasn't gone to YouTube and either hasn't personally or doesn't know somebody who has downloaded a song maybe watched a movie or a replay of one of their favorite television shows online. When we talk about a smart grid, for example, the benefits of a smart grid and utilization of smart meters is contingent upon an information technology backbone. Those of us who pay bills online, on and on and on. What I'm trying to do by giving you all these different examples of what's done over the internet is sort of turn it back to you all and say, does that mean we should have not only government officials, but medical officials represented on the task force, education officials represented on the task force? Is it higher ed? Is it K-12? Is it only public institutions? Is it private four-year universities? Is it charter schools as well? Public safety officials, representatives from the telecommunications industry. What about entertainment industry representatives? What about utility representatives or others from the energy sector? What about banking industry representatives on the commission? What about the manufacturers who build the equipment that, when assembled, makes up our network? Labor representatives, retailers, on and on and on. Clearly, the point is we need everybody to participate. But again, the makeup of the council, as in the bill before you today, was our first cut at having a wide enough group to corral both the political will as well as our resources and policy implementation oomph, not sure how you spell that, but that's the right word, while figuring out a way that all the other stakeholders, because there's dozens and dozens, we can go on all day, have some way to participate and collaborate as well. I'm more than happy to continue to work the makeup of this council and maybe include a couple more. I can't answer your question today, Mr. Huffman, if it's who specifically you're going to add and who you're not going to add. I'm not ready for that kind of an answer today. Is it an ongoing conversation? Yes. At the end of the day, will we have a 50-member plus all-inclusive council? I hope not.
You shouldn't.
I hope not. So, as you suggest, well, maybe not all of these 17 should be accommodated, but okay, you pick which 5 or 7 are or aren't going to be. Somebody's going to not be on the council. Does that mean they can't serve in an advisory capacity? No. Does that mean that they won't be attending meetings? I hope not. So, whether or not somebody's added to the council, I hope does not determine their commitment, their participation, should this council be set up and once it gets working. But I also want to thank Assemblymember Furutani for his comments, because I think he hit the nail on the head and probably did so in a much more diplomatic way than I might have. I know this isn't necessarily a close. There may be some more questions, but let me re-emphasize that this is not necessarily a policy-making body. This is an implementation body. This is a coordinating council, if you will. Could they potentially come forward with policy recommendations? Absolutely. But that's not what we're charging them to do.
Since that was my question, just a quick follow-up. Is this bill double referred?
No.
Okay, so I just want to point out that the concern that you outlined very appropriately about Pandora's box, about everybody wanting in, if you let anyone in, is a very legitimate concern, but one that I would have had much earlier in the process. This is your last stop. And so I think you've got an opportunity right now to show a little bit of reasonable flexibility in the composition of this task force, and then we're going to support your bill on the floor. And then you're done. So I think the Pandora's box moment is past, and I think I just want to commend to you my suggestion that you work with the groups. They're not requesting every one of those organizations that you mentioned. I'd be real concerned if they were.
I commit to working with them. If anything, from a sort of a fundamental policy standpoint, I wasn't joking when I said I love it, because it has made the point. Broadband touches every aspect of our daily lives, and we want to make sure that those benefits continue to grow, but are managed in a way that is all for the positive. So look forward to working with all the stakeholders. This isn't the final bill that's before you. We're continuing to take input and continue to meet with folks. And with a few changes, I hope to have earned your support, if not today, when it comes to the floor.
Thank you. Mr. Knight.
Well, I'm not going to be a dead horse, and I expect that Warren will be a senator one day. My biggest issue with this is we are creating a new council, a new type of committee for government, With the task force, the governor could go in there and kind of pick and choose and say, go and work on this and report back to me and things like that. What we can do here, though, we can look at some of the kind of role players. I mean, broadband was only 2 or 3% in the households in year 2000. Now we're up over 60% in 2010. I mean, we're growing in leaps and bounds. We would expect, or we would hope, that the people that have got us there, or the people that have gotten that input to get us there, would be part of something like this, so that they would give the input, and it wouldn't just be government entities talking to government entities saying, yeah, you guys are doing the wrong thing, and you guys are doing the wrong thing, and we kind of never get anywhere. I think when you bring in the private industry and the people that have worked it, they're really going to push, because their success is going to be more money down the road. So, I mean, that's the greatest motivator that you can get. So that's kind of where I'd like to see it. I understand that the governor's task force is going to run out. I think that a new governor could push forward a new task force or do something that he or she would like to do to see what broadband's going to bring us in the next 10 years. So I will not be supporting this bill right now, but I'd like to see how this is going to move forward and if this is going to change on who is going to be on this council.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. Ms. Fuller.
As you know, I was very supportive of helping your original concept bill and SB 1193, and I'm really torn because my area really benefits from this, but creating another completely governmental bureaucracy to implement something that industry is actually the implementer, has the hardware solutions, is just very difficult for me to support at this time. I'm open-minded, and I hope to see that you might take some of the suggestions to include more industry people. And I get it, you can't have 1 million people, I get that. But I think the time is over for just governmental bureaucracies that are probably going to cost more and not have the people who actually have some of the solutions or the person that's going to implement. So I won't be supporting it at this time, but I do think you're on the right track.
Okay. If I can respond, two things. Number one, I'm not suggesting we establish a whole new big government bureaucracy here. All we're calling for is a mechanism for some of our key state officials that exist already to better communicate and collaborate so that we can be more efficient in delivering to the public what we have said is in order and is a priority for the state. Second, I agree. The participation in some form of the private sector, those who have helped us get there in terms of a deployment standpoint, right? Because a lot more people now have access, let alone actual broadband adoption or subscription of some sort in their home, either landline or even wirelessly. The scope of broadband today, or the conversation about broadband today, is very different than it was 10 years ago, where it was almost exclusively build out, build out, build out, build out. Who has access, who doesn't? If you live in this part of the state or in these types of neighborhoods, you do, and if you don't, you don't. Today, with broadband deployment, not quite 100%, but was certainly in the 90s. The conversation has evolved not so much into broadband construction or build out, if you will, but broadband adoption and what are the barriers to adoption, issues of literacy, hardware, et cetera. Broadband investment, because once you build out the network, there's still maintenance costs and upgrade costs as more and more things are possible over the internet. And certainly there's a workforce component to all this too, because who's building it out, who's maintaining it going forward. So the broadband conversation, I just want to underscore, is not just about, building it out and who's investing in the wires to make sure it's accessible, but it's particularly on the adoption or the literacy piece of this to make sure that it's not just available to folks, but people are actually utilizing it and enjoying the economic benefits, the educational benefits, the government access benefits of broadband.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Swanson.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I thank the author for the bill. I'll move the bill.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been moved by Assemblyman Swanson, seconded by Ms. Ma. Mr. Fletcher, did you still have a question that you want to pose? Okay, and I want to thank all of those who have given your testimony. Would you like to close, Senator?
Ask for I vote.
All right. Madam Secretary, please call the vote.
Knight. No. Knight, no. Berryhill. Buchanan. Aye. Buchanan, aye. Carter. Aye. Carter, aye. Fletcher. Aye. Fletcher, aye. Fong. Aye. Fong, aye. Fuentes. Fuller. No. Fuller, no. Furutani.
Aye.
Furutani, aye. Huffman. Aye. Huffman, aye. Ma. Aye. Ma, aye. Skinner. Swanson.
Swanson, aye.
Swanson, aye. Valines. Bradford.
Aye.
Bradford, aye.
It's 9-2. Congratulations, Senator. And the amendment was a due pass to appropriations. So no amendments. No amendments. The motions, I should say. The motions, no amendments. All right. Next we have Senator 1476, SB 1476.
Yes. My next non-controversial bill is SB 1476, which really is a little bit of a follow-up on a bill I had last year. As many of you know, this legislature and the governor acted to adopt smart grid as a policy of the state. And a key component to the benefits of a smart grid is the deployment and utilization of smart meters. But the use of these new technology, smart meters that is, requires greater diligence upon utilities or by utilities and ours to protect consumers' personally identifiable information, which would include electrical and gas consumption data. The purpose of this bill before you is to ensure that customers have the benefits of the new technology of smart meters without having to relinquish control over their consumption data. The greatest value of smart meters will come when customers can monitor their electricity use online. One utility in particular, Sempra, has been on the forefront of providing this interface for their customers, and I applaud them for that. But unfortunately, up until recently, the only way customers were able to interface with their data was by consenting to allowing the utility to share that data with third-party folks for commercial purposes without their consent. This bill does not prohibit the use of these types of applications, but it does require that customers have an option for whether or not that data is shared, but still be able to utilize that interface to better manage their electricity consumption. I know there's some parties that will testify, including Tech America, the PUC, utilities, and others, on specific language to make sure that the bill does not hamper the ability of utilities to contract with other folks to better implement energy efficiency programs or demand response services, but still allow for consumers to make choices on their own. We'll continue to work with them, and I think we'll arrive at a place where everybody can meet their goals, the energy efficiencies, the energy conservation measures, but at the same time maintain the consumer protections that we're striving for. And would certainly make every effort to have that done by the time this bill would reach the Assembly Judiciary Committee in a week or two. Hey, Lenny.
Yes. Senator?
Thank you, Senator.
Take it away.
I guess witnesses in support.
Yes, Lenny Goldberg for Turn and Privacy Rights Clearinghouse. There are significant privacy implications to the use of smart meter data. This bill takes a very small step to make sure that you don't have to effectively put that data out on the wire where it can be accessed very broadly. You can keep that data for yourself. We think there's a broader privacy regime here. The PUC is looking at a number of these issues. Other legislation has looked at these issues, but this is a very small but necessary step to make sure that customers can keep their data private, and we support it on that basis.
Thank you.
Matthew Marcus with the Division of Ratepayer Advocates. I understand there's going to be some amendments discussed. I just want everyone to keep in mind that managing your energy usage is an effective way to conserve and to lower your monthly bill, and we support the bill. Thank you.
Alicia Priego with Public Utilities. We're supportive amended on the bill, and we want to thank the author for working with us to maintain flexibility on the appropriateness of when to use third-party providers.
Mr. Chairman and members, Barry Brokaw on behalf of O-Power. O-Power is a company that provides material to the consumer under contract with the utility, whether it's an investor-owned or municipal-owned utility. And you'll get these inserts that say, this is what your neighbor is using, this is what you're using, with simple tips on how you can reduce your energy consumption. When SMUD ran our program last year, they found a savings of 2.4% on energy bills just from these inserts. We're working with the author because he intends to allow this type of activity, and we just want to make sure the language of the bill is precise. So we thank you very much for your consideration.
All right, thank you. Any more witnesses in support? Having one come?
Mr. Chairman, members, Randy Chin from Southern California Edison. I'm one of the utilities that the senator was referring to. We're supportive of the concept. There's a couple of specific pieces that we think we need change so that we can implement the bill and provide protections for our ratepayers. But other than that, we're happy to work with the author. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chin. Witnesses in opposition?
Mr. Chairman, Jim Hawley at TechNet, and we're not opposed to the bill. In fact, we have no concerns with the intent of the bill, but for the record, we do briefly want to talk about a few of the issues that are important to us that we intend to work with the author to try to get some additional clarification on. But basically, this is a bill that is talking about a very, very important subject, really how to take the benefits of smart meters and smart grid technologies and make those available, as the senator indicated, to the average Californian so that they can see and benefit from them. And there are huge benefits from doing this. The average consumer that's on a smart meter can get a reduction in their energy bill and their household energy use of 10 to 15%. We're talking about smart meters and smart grid reducing carbon emissions by up to 18%. We need big reductions, and to get the big reductions that we're talking about, we need to make this easy for consumers, and consumers need to get the data off of their meters and provide it with the third-party providers of their choice. So we agree with the author about the intent of the bill. We basically envision an industry that is rapidly evolving. We're not talking about a utility or a monopoly model. We're really talking about vigorous competition, lots of new companies, and California is in the forefront. We have 40 new smart grid companies in California that are doing this work. The issues that we have are really to clarify the written consent language in the bill. The bill basically says, and rightly so, that the customer must consent in writing to the use of the provision of their data to the third party. Our view is that we should be talking here about the electronic signature requirement that is the standard under federal law and under e-commerce and under California law, and not have a requirement for digital signatures, which is what's currently in there. There's also a section 2C3 that establishes the conditions under which a consumer can choose to have their energy usage data pulled from the meter and used in a third-party device. We think that needs to be clarified, that the consumer can choose the third-party device of their choosing, and we'd like to work with the senator to clarify that and a couple other things. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions by the committee? No questions. Senator, would you like to close?
No, just to acknowledge that we do have a couple of final points to finish ironing out with some clearer language than what's in the bill today, but full confidence that we will, and ask for your vote.
I just, before I ask for a motion, I just want to commend the senator for listening to those concerns and has worked, and he has shared those with me, as well as I've shared some of my concerns as it relates to this bill. And I have no doubt right now in this time when information is constantly compromised, this is a good bill at a good time to make sure that we don't compromise private information of their customers. We've seen governments do it. We've seen private industry do it. So we want to make sure our utilities don't do it. But I understand the integrity of the bill, and it's important at this time. We're seeking a motion, do pass. Second. It's been moved by Mr. Knight, seconded by Mr. Fuatani. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Knight. Knight, aye. Berryhill. Buchanan. Buchanan, aye. Carter. Carter, aye. Fletcher. Fletcher, aye. Fong. Fong, aye. Fuentes. Fuller. Furutani.
Aye.
Furutani, aye. Huffman. Huffman, aye. Ma. Ma, aye. Skinner. Swanson. Valines. Valines, aye. Bradford.
Aye.
Bradford,
Aye.
Out 10-0.
Bill is out, Senator, 10-0, and it's a due pass to Assembly Judiciary.
Thank you very
Thank you for all three of your bills today. Next up, I think it's Senator Kehoe. SB 1437. Senator, if you're ready, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to present the bill. It has, as your analysis reflects, new content. SB 1437 is a pretty straightforward bill, members. It requires that the California Independent System Operator annually appear before the utility committees in both houses of the legislature and report on their operations. This is consistent with California Public Utilities Commission activity now as governed by state law. And as you know, the California Independent System Operator is a nonprofit public benefit corporation that was formed by SB 1890 and that deregulated energy in our state. It's not entirely a public agency. Some of its operations function like a private company. Its 5 members, board members, are all appointees of the governor. And that is confirmed by the Senate. That's the extent of their legislative oversight at this point. CalISO's work is to ensure that the electrical transmission grid reliability is maintained at all times, and it does so by scheduling energy load for each investor-owned utility throughout the state. If the energy load looks like it's coming up short due to increased demand, CalISO can order more generation or spot market purchases or reductions in load. So they are vital to the operation of our electrical system here in California. It does an important, highly technical job, but it is not error-free. And this bill came about as a result of my interest in looking more closely at CalISO, and I think you might be interested as well. On April 1st of this year in San Diego, a little bit after midnight, due to operator error, 300,000 homes in San Diego were blacked out for about an hour. Luckily, it was in the middle of the night, and there were no emergency situations going on, no wildfires or stormy weather or anything like that. But it was really a jolt trying to figure out what happened and why. I've met with CalISO a number of times, and they've been forthcoming, but it's a very closed system. They report to the FERC and to the Western Energy Council. Even the PUC doesn't really have any oversight over their system operations. The committee analysis points out that in their summary of the events that resulted in the San Diego blackout, that as far as we know, proper steps were taken, but getting specific details about the blackout and the events leading up to it and what has happened since then has been a difficult task. And this bill will at least provide annual oversight by both the Assembly and the Senate. It's something I think is our responsibility. It'll provide information regarding overall grid management, transmission assessments. It will increase CalISO's accountability to the public and the transparency of our power system operation. I think this is as I said, our legislative responsibility, and I think it's very important to the California public. I would ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Senator. Witnesses in support.
Yes, Lenny Goldberg for turn. We were here when the ISO was created. It is a creature of the legislature. It was created by public policy here. Our chief electricity person, Mike Florio, was one of the original of the 5-member board. We had previously had a stakeholder board that had a lot of input. I think the ISO tends to be a closed system that is not directly responsive to the legislature that created it, and nor need it be in many of its technical issues. But there are a number of significant policy issues having to do with pricing, having to do with transmission investments, that we think it would be helpful. It would help the legislature to become schooled in some of those operations, and it would help the ISO to be able to explain to a representative body its activities and decisions of that year, which are very significant.
Thank you. Next witness.
Mary McDonald with the California Independent System Operator. We don't have a position on the bill since it was recently amended, but I can tell you that we are happy to work with the legislature and the senator. What she's asking for is information that's available on our website. And I think from our perspective, from the legislature would be probably more enlightened by learning about a lot of the things that we're doing, and we're happy to work with her on this.
Thank you.
Are there any witnesses in opposition? Seeing none, any members have questions? Seeing none, I'm just looking for a motion to do pass. It's been moved by Mr. Fong, seconded by Ms. Buchanan. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Thank you.
Knight. Knight, aye. Berryhill. Buchanan. Buchanan, aye. Carter. Carter, aye. Fletcher. Fletcher, aye. Fong. Fong, aye. Fuentes. Fuller. Fuller, aye. Furutani.
Aye.
Furutani, aye. Huffman. Ma. Ma, aye. Skinner. Swanson.
Swanson, aye.
Swanson, aye. Valines. Valines, aye. Bradford.
Aye.
Bradford, aye.
Senator, that bill's out 11-0.
Thank you, members.
Thank you. Next up is Senator Simitian, SB 376. Mr. Simitian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Mr. Chairman, the analysis does a very nice job, I think, on page 1 of laying out in summary format and fashion what the bill does. So I will not repeat what the bill does. I think maybe a little context and history, though, would be helpful in terms of explaining why we're sitting here. Members, some of you will recall, and others of you will have been happy to have missed a great deal of push and shove here in the building around the issue of LNG terminals and their possible siting off the coast of California. Between the years 2005 and 2008, a number of various projects were proposed, and there was quite a bit of push and shove, mostly in Southern California. There wasn't really a process in place that allowed those projects to go forward in a sort of thoughtful and deliberate way. As the staff analysis indicates, the process is fairly complicated. Depending on where a project is being proposed for location, it may involve lead agency status for FERC, or it may involve lead agency status by the Coast Guard. It turns out then that depending again on where the project is, the governor may have veto authority. In some cases, the Coastal Commission gets into the act, and in some cases, the State Lands Commission gets into the act. What we saw, as I say, for a sort of a 4-year period was that there was no process in place. I argued throughout that period that no one was being well served. I argued that business wasn't being well served because, after all, how many of these projects ultimately got final approval? 0. I argued that the public wasn't being well served because what we had was a sort of a series of pitched battles, trench by trench, if you will, from local folks who were opposed to the particular project in their particular area, but without any really sort of thoughtful, comprehensive way to look at this on a statewide basis. So I had a bill that passed both the state Senate and the state Assembly back in 2005. It was a much more robust bill than the bill you have before you. It got caught up, Mr. Chairman, on the last night of session in 2005 and fell victim to some of the push and shove between the two houses of the legislature that unfortunately sometimes dogs our work effort. Tried again in 2006. At that point, we struggled, though, because some businesses, with some legitimacy, said, look, we're already down the path. We don't want to see a new set of rules imposed when we've been working under the non-rules that were already there. Tried again in 2007 and 8. A lot of the opposition had disappeared, but again, because there were players who were sort of already down the path, didn't want to be affected by any new set of rules, there was still some opposition. what I've done is I've let time pass. All of these projects have now come and gone, with one exception that's still theoretically, although I think not practically, still in the mix. That raised a interesting question for your consulting staff, which is, so why on earth are you back here with your bill, Senator Simitian? And the answer to that question is because I don't think we want to go through that again. I don't know if it's going to be 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years from now, but someday the world will have changed. There will be another proposal, and we won't be in place to have a thoughtful and rational discussion if we don't have the basic framework for that conversation in place. That's what the bill does. It does not pick winners and losers. I think this was a legitimate point that was raised by your staff. What it does do is it says one day, if you're the governor, or you're on the State Lands Commission, or you're on the Coastal Commission, or you're working with one of those EIRs at the local level, we will know what the range of available technologies is, who has the ability to meet certain qualifications. Is there, in fact, a demonstrated need? Because we need to know that if people are going to have a conversation about whether or not there are overriding considerations. And it will also require, the one thing it does require folks do is to confer with military folks up and down the state. The U.S. Navy and the U.S. Marine Corps were very much involved in the previous debate on the bills because they wanted to make sure that any of their activities off the coast of California were not interfered with by any proposal. That's the bill. To my knowledge, there's no opposition on file, and I appreciate your letting me go back through the history, but I thought it was important to ask and answer the question, so what are we doing here if there's no fight? I would say if there's no fight, it's the perfect time to finally put a set of rules in place that will guide us in the future. Respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you. Any witnesses in support? Seeing none. Opposition? Any committee members with questions? Ms. Buchanan.
Thank you. When I read the analysis, it says that the current law already requires the CEC to assess future demand and supply. So when I read that, I ask myself, why do we need the bill? If they assess future demand and supply, why then are we creating a report? So someone wants to do a project 2 months later, and we're going to do another report to assess that?
What we've said is that the IPR process may change over time, but the goal is to make sure that there is an assessment of what the state's energy needs are. What we've done here is focus specifically on natural gas and required that be part of the assessment on a going-forward basis, and that if it isn't timely, if it isn't current when somebody should happen to step up in the future, that we make sure that we have the current timely assessment that is part of the debate so that can be factored into the debate.
So I'm still having a problem understanding after reading both. I've got my notes on the bill, my notes here. So what you're saying is natural gas is not part of the report that they do and the assessment they do right now?
The last time we went through this exercise, the IPR staff is giving me some helpful cliff notes over here.
Good.
Staff is from the last time we went through this IPR process, the analysis was 5 years old. So we were having a great and raging debate about a half dozen different projects up and down the state, arguments from folks on one side or the other side about whether or not the need was there which would justify projects of this magnitude, which is in part a market decision, which I'm happy to let the market make, but it's also a decision about whether or not the need is there so that you could justify the overriding considerations that would be necessary if the impacts weren't mitigated. So the goal here is to make sure we don't find ourselves in that situation again.
So if I read your bill correctly, your bill requires this on a project-by-project basis.
I think I wouldn't put it that way, if I may, Assemblymember. Okay. What I would say is my bill says that if there is a project on the horizon when there isn't a timely IPR assessment of the natural gas needs, then there has to be an update consistent with the project.
So why not have a bill that requires that annually or semi-annually or whatever that the demand and supply needs for natural gas be included in the CEC report, that rather than, I mean, because we can talk about the nuance, but the way I read your bill, because I don't know whether someone may not consider 6 months timely, or maybe they consider 5 years timely. So it seems to me like that's left open for debate. Why not require the CEC to include that the need for natural gas in their report and to report on an annual, semi-annual, whatever basis, biannual, instead of
And the answer is, the answer is, I have learned through hard experience on this legislation that if I can do what I'm trying to do with the lightest possible touch, I am likely to keep opposition at bay. If we start to do something, particularly in a difficult budget circumstance, on a regular basis, and some people would argue whether there is a need or not, then all of a sudden we've got financial consequences for the state. So I'm trying to do this on the lightest possible basis. If CEC wants to do this every 30 days for the rest of the time, good for them. But what I am saying is, if when someone shows up, there isn't something that's current within the last 6 months, then it's time to make sure that it's updated so we don't run into the problem we had the last time around.
Well, in essence, that if something hasn't been updated within 6 months, in essence, aren't you doing a report project by project then, instead of just having a statewide assessment?
No, I would rephrase it this way. As somebody, I would say we're not requiring them to do the work until and unless it's necessary.
Wouldn't you want something that's more forward-looking in terms of what the demand's going to be?
I absolutely would, and I'm trying to respect what I think are the real limits of our financial circumstances and trying to give them the flexibility to do the study the way. If I start to provide direction to them independent of my concern about having a process for LNG, then I'll get pushback from the entity. I'm not looking for that, and I'll also create problems for myself and the Appropriations Committee. I'm not looking for that. What I'm saying is, if and when this is ever an issue again, 2, 5, 10, or 20 years from now, I just want to make sure that we're not sitting there having the conversation with 5-year-old market data about what the need is. I think, if I could close with this comment in response, Mr. Chairman, in a perfect world, I would take the approach you have suggested. Regrettably, we do not live, work, or legislate in that perfect world, and that's why I have a more modest approach before the committee today.
I can respect our differences of opinion. This just seems to me to be an awkward way of going about doing it.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Buchanan. Any other questions by members? Seeing none, Senator Simonian, would you like to close?
Thank you for your patience. I know it's been a long hearing, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Ask for an aye vote.
Thank you. We're seeking a motion due pass to natural resources. It's been moved by Mr. Swanson, seconded by Ms. Carter. Due pass to natural resources. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Knight. No. Knight, no. Berryhill. Buchanan. Carter. Carter, aye. Fletcher. Fong. Aye. Fong, aye. Fuentes. Fuller. No. Fuller, no. Furutani. Aye. Furutani, aye. Huffman. Ma. Aye. Ma, aye. Skinner. Swanson.
Swanson, aye.
Swanson, aye. Valines. Valines, no. Bradford.
Aye.
Bradford, aye.
Senator, your current vote is 6-3. It's not out. It will remain on call for absent members. Okay. Yes, if the sergeant would call absent members, all other bills are out, and we'll leave the roll open for the next 10 minutes for absent members. Yes, Mr. Swanson.
I wanted to add on to the vote. Oh. There was a vote.
Yeah, we're going to lift the call in order of all the bills and let everybody add on. We're going to call roll on all the bills that have made it out, except for Mr. Simonian's bill, for all the members that were absent or would like to add on at this time. So, Madam Secretary, please call.
SB 1040, Berryhill, Fletcher, Fuentes, Fuller, Skinner,
That's
Valines.
1040.
Valines, no.
No. Fuller, no.
Fuller, no. SB 1437, Berryhill, Fuentes, Huffman, Skinner. SB 1462, Berryhill, Fuentes, Skinner, Valines, Felines, no. SB 1476, Berryhill, Fuentes, Fuller, Skinner,
Steve.
Swanson,
Swanson, aye.
Swanson, aye. Fuller, aye. SB 1476.
Members, we have yet to adjourn. We have yet to adjourn. We still have one bill on the call.
Can you lift the call on 376? No. Oh, not.
Members, we have not adjourned the committee. SB 376 is still on call. We're waiting for absent members to record their vote. All right, I'm lifting the call on SB 376, and I'm going to hold it open for the next 10 minutes for members to arrive.
Buchanan, Buchanan, aye. Huffman, Huffman, aye. Huffman, aye. SB 437.
Adjourned yet, or we're not adjourned?
Not adjourned, just be glad to work here.
I didn't vote for Keith. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He's still that one over.
No, I have not. Oh, because yeah, we have one more bill still coming, right?
You got your notes.
Check your.
I was out of the room when the vote was taken. If you got me, you got me.
You said 437. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Ms. Buchanan. Appreciate you.
I'm happy to be aye on Keith.
But you asked just now to be aye.
Yes.
Is that right?
That's true.
Right.
You wrote it down then.
I did. And I even announced it just now.
You are doing a great job. Thank you. All right. How are you, Senator? Good to see you. Congratulations. Thanks for your favorable treatment of my humble efforts.
All right.
We'll hold it open still.
SB 376 is out 8-3. We'll still hold it open for absent members. Senator, your bill is out. Thank you.